Guys, have you ever felt that you were trapped under the shadow of old rules, dysfunctional authority, or past trauma? Well, I recently watched the Michael biopic. I think it's a great story how it showed how Michael Jackson's journey from facing his fears to reclaiming his agency can teach us a lot about how to do that. And hi, if you're new here, I'm Kahir. I'm here to take you one step closer to self love. Growing up, I wasn't the biggest Michael Jackson fan because, well, during my time, that was when his controversies were coming up. That he was this pedophile and everything, and he had this weird face. So I thought, oh, Michael Jackson is just this freak. But as I grew older and I understood his story, when I learned about his traumas and how he had to self-differentiate himself away from the Jackson Five, I find the story really inspiring. No, this movie, I think, is more of a sanitized version of his actual story. I look at it more as a love letter to Michael Jackson. And so if you're looking for like a very gritty, let's get into the real um, controversies, all this, to see the real life of Michael Jackson, that's not it. But the overall story about facing your fear or facing a tyrant is very motivating. Now, the film actually opens up with young Michael Jackson as a kid, daydreaming in a window. I think he's watching other kids play, and his dad literally takes him aside, like, no, 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 no daydreaming. We have practice right now. We're going to practice. He seems stern, but then Michael says something. I don't remember the fact that he's kind of standing up to his father, like, and then his dad takes off his belt and beats him right in front of his family. And that was very emotional for me. I wasn't ever beat with a belt, but one can only imagine how traumatic that is. They didn't even call their dad dad. They called him Joseph. Right? That's how much an authority figure he was. And the movie is PG-13, so they can't really go into depth how bad the trauma was. Like Joseph Jackson would use anything, like coat hangers, anything that was around him. I think even tree branches. I just watched a video. It talked about that he would scare his children at night, like wear a mask and wake them up in the middle of the night. It's like crazy, crazy stuff, man. But in the movie, so he's and Michael starts sobbing, and he runs to the bathroom and locks himself in. And this is what caused even more trauma. His mother goes in the like knocks at the door, like, Michael, are you okay? And she doesn't do anything, and she didn't say anything while he was getting beat. And I'm like, damn, damn. I don't know what was going on, but that it broke my heart. Basically, like no one was defending this poor kid, even his own mother. And there was probably, of course, some other toxic dynamic with the mom and dad. Like, because Dr. Gabor Mate says trauma is not necessarily the wound; it's what happens afterwards. To put it in his own words, trauma is not what happens to you, it is what happens inside of you as a result of what happens to you. So you can only imagine what kind of definitions you can get if you're being beat, no one's standing up for you, not even your mom, how unlovable you must feel. And then we're like, oh, why did Michael Jackson have all these addictions? Why was he all weird? Like, bro, the actor that played Joseph Jackson in the movie, he did a phenomenal performance. Coleman Domingo, like just his presence radiated fear. He had this aura of a villain, of a tyrant, man. And later in the movie, and in real life too, he justifies his behaviors like, oh, I did that so I would keep them off the streets. Like, look at all the other African American kids. They would be on the streets in gangs if I didn't whoop their ass. And even I saw there's this interview of him with Fox News, and there's comments be like, "Oh, good for you! You know, you're the one that raised Michael Jackson." People were defending that shit, man. Maybe they didn't know the extent of the abuse, but now I think as a collective consciousness, we're more aware. Like, man, abuse is not okay. And I think Joseph Jackson represents our ego. That if it, like at least I can relate with like I would beat myself up and be like, oh, I need to teach myself right. If I don't whoop my ass, I'm gonna be I'm gonna be a lazy piece of shit. I'm gonna join the gangs of laziness. and I'm sure people say, oh, if he didn't whoop his ass, he wouldn't be so successful like he is now. But if you in the movie, young Michael just has this passion, this joy. Like you could see his soul lights up every time he's performing. And later in the movie, he uses his passion in a more positive way when he self-differentiates. We'll get that later. But I think a lot of my brothers and sisters out there believe like we have to whoop ourselves in order to have success. This is something I had to deal with, and I still have my thoughts and my moments. And I just have to remind myself like, no, whooping myself is just gonna keep causing me suffering. And now we have real life examples of how you don't have to be such a hard ass to achieve success. So you probably heard Alyssa Liu. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. She's an American figure skater, and she retired at age 16 due to extreme burnout. I'm sure she did all the stereotypical things like having this intense pressure, this very rigid schedule. And then she came back to the sport just for the love of the game. And she prioritized her mental health and she took the gold. Right? She started loving herself, loving the sport, and doing it just because that was her highest excitement, her passion. And isn't that beautiful? Where you could do the thing, be successful, and enjoy the whole entire journey. And I think of the opposite. Guys, remember the whole scandal of Larry Nassar? He was a physician for the gymnasts, I think, for also for the Olympics. I remember watching this documentary how this had this culture. You have to be super strict, super disciplined. And I think that culture of, oh, I have to do everything I can, I'll sacrifice whatever it takes to win the gold. And think about it. Like, I understand showing what humans are capable of. That's what the whole like Olympics is about. And it's fun to watch. But at the same time, like, was it worth it? All this sacrifice, breaking of limbs, of, and people covered him up. I'm sure because of this toxic sports culture, and in the Michael movie, this toxic music industry. Also, this very dysfunctional family. As in real life, because in the movie they show, I think, maybe about he has 6 siblings, but in real life, the Jackson family was, I think, 9. I think actually there's some one even had like a twin brother, but passed away like the first day. But still, like imagine being in like a small house like that, no privacy. So the movie continues. We see there's a montage of them, Jackson 5, performing at different gigs. Also, it shows a scene where Joseph takes off his belt. Michael's about to cry, and a door slams shut. And it's like, ugh. It's like you showing the constant abuse. Then they get discovered by Motown Records. They have huge success, and it cuts to the future. They're living in a mansion of a pool, and Michael Jackson, I think it's like a young adult at this phase. And this is when his journey of self-differentiation really starts. There's a scene where Michael is in the pool. He's like on some floating device. He's relaxing. And they're like, his brother's like, what are you doing, Mike? It's like, I'm trying to be in this creative state so the creator can give me an idea. If I don't act upon it, Prince might. Something like that. But he was in receiver mode, the flow, which is such a contrast to what Joseph was doing. Like, oh, I'm gonna beat music into you, and this process of going to receiver mode is talked about by a lot of creators, and one that I really look up to, Jorge Rivera Herons. He's the creator of Epic the Musical. So, I'm a theater kid. I love that stuff. But he talked about this, that he would go on walks, listen to music, and just let creative ideas, flow to him. And look how successful he is because he was in the receiver mode, man. So this is when Mike gets the idea of making his first solo album off the wall. Now, he doesn't have the strength yet to tell his dad directly, but he does the best he can to express his self agency by talking to his agents. He's like, I want you to tell them that it's your idea, that like a solo album is your idea. You bet if he asks for permission, like, Joseph, can I do a solo album? No. Imagine if MJ didn't have the bravery at that point to stand up for himself and express his own creativity. But luckily he did, and Off the Wall was a huge success. Now, he didn't need a belt, and in the movie, when he's in the recording studio, he's saying positive affirmations. He's like, "You're beautiful. You're you're a champion. You got this." And I'm diving deep that Michael Jackson really worked on his subconscious mind. Think about it. He had to change his whole entire identity. He used to be just known as Michael Jackson, the kid from the Jackson 5, but he wanted to make a new persona, MJ. And that meant going against the grain, going against his father to show, hey, I want to express myself creatively fully, and I'm going to be nice to myself while I do it. And one can only imagine how hard that must have been to take your own actions. There's this part in the movie where his dad wants him to do a tour, and Michael's like, I need time to think. And Joseph is like, I told you what to think. So think of that dynamic. So even though he had this fear and he didn't face him directly, he still did the best thing he could. He started developing self-agency in comparison to the Elvis's biopic. Elvis had this horrible manager, Tom Parker, that locked him in these golden chains. Like, yeah, you can make a lot of money, but I'm going to control your schedule. You're going to only play in Las Vegas. I'm not going to let you tour outside of the US. And I think that's what killed his spirit. You see, later in life, he was overweight. He died of a heart attack. And that could have been Michael. He could have cruised on, just did what his dad wanted, even if it cost him his soul, but he didn't. After the success of Off the Wall, MJ now believes in himself more. New management. And this is when he meets John Branca. He hires him. It's like, I want you to fire my dad. How do you want me to do it? Quickly. And in the movie, he sends him a fax. Like, oh, you're fired. And the movie, he's still living at the Jackson family house, and there's a scene where his dad confronts him. He's like, how could you do that to your own flesh and blood? But he did it. He said no. He stood up for himself. And we saw what happens if you don't. I wish Elvis said no to his crappy manager, and we saw the consequences. But MJ did it. I can only imagine how hard it could have been to stand up to someone like your own abusive father like that. And then he starts working on a new album, Thriller, and of course that becomes the best-selling album of all time, and he rockets to stardom, to being an icon. And here's the thing. So even though he's an icon, his dad starts, like, I think, getting jealous. He still thinks he has control over Michael. He said, oh, the Jackson 5, this is Coca-Cola. Mike, you're Pepsi. And we're going to do a tour, the Victory Tour. And think about it. MJ could have definitely said no. I'm the biggest pop star in the world right now. I don't need to do anything you say. But he had this obligation to his family. Maybe something subconsciously was there as well, to trying to please his father. And he said yes when he really wanted to say no. And we see that had very negative repercussions. His dad signed him up to do the Pepsi commercial that we all know. That's when he had this horrific accident where his hair was on fire. I looked at it as if the universe was telling Mike, this is not your way. Stand up for yourself. And unfortunately, this is when MJ is introduced to painkillers. which in his life he developed an addiction. And what Dr. Gabor Mate talks about addiction is trying to heal this wound inside of us that we're not good enough. Of course, I think chemically it's really hard to stop as well. And this is how Michael used alchemy. He transformed this extremely negative occurrence. He got third-degree burns in the, at least in the movie, that's what it said. He got third-degree burns. He was going to have to wear a wig for the rest of his life. And me, as an audience member, I was like, damn that Joseph. If he made Michael do this tour, this is if he didn't, if Michael only said no, but Joseph manipulated him, and now it's all his fault. But Michael represented what the Course teaches us. I'm not a victim of the world I see. And he sued Pepsi, he got a 7-figure settlement, and he donated all that money to the hospital that he stayed at. He didn't have to do that, man. And see, he made such a negative experience into a positive one. And we go to the end of the movie where Michael is doing his tour for the Jackson 5, the Victory Tour, and he impromptu says, this has been great, and we've been doing this for 20 years, but this is the final show. And we see Joseph's reaction, be like, what? How could he say that? What the final? And this is where Michael reclaims his independence. You can see the joy on his face, and his brothers are smiling. And after the show, Joseph is trying to confront Michael, like, well, what do you mean final? What do you mean? And he doesn't even give them the time of day. He just keeps walking forward. Man. And this really resonated with me, because when you try to differentiate yourself from the dysfunctional family system, it's very difficult. Because for most of my life, I didn't know who I was. And then when I moved out and trying to understand who I was, and I made some pretty radical changes in my life, that I used to be a very heavy meat eater back in the States. And then when I moved to Poland, I also went on my spiritual journey that led me to transitioning to veganism. So I had this spiritual tradition. I was raised Catholic just because this is what Polish people do, but it wasn't fulfilling, and I was getting really deep into the Course of Miracles and other spiritual teachings, changing my diet. And there was, especially the veganism thing, guys, bro, if I could just tell you, especially my mom, how angry she was, bro. And see, this is the thing. There exists a reality where Michael completely submitted. He let his dad do all the thinking, managed his career, and God only knows what could have happened, but he sure wouldn't be happy. But he chose the more difficult path and said no, and stood up to that toxic authority figure, and he chose again. He chose his own path. So I recommend this movie. I think it was really good time. And think about one thing that you're fearful of that's holding you back, and see what you could do to face it, just like MJ faced his own dad. All right, I hope you guys enjoyed that video. Please subscribe if you want more healing content like this. May the Holy Spirit light up your path wherever it takes you. Take care.